Hey, welcome back. You're listening to, or you're watching From the Garoffice with Micah Foster, a podcast all around faith in the digital space. We talk to pastors and ministry leaders, volunteers, and people who are interested in utilizing digital to reach the world, their communities, and even their neighborhood. So today I have a special conversation with a church planter, Cody Wallace, who's been the pastor of Journey North County, close to San Diego. They've been hit with the pandemic, just like the rest of us. They were in a theater. They moved out of the theater. Cody talks about some leadership mistakes that he feels leaders could learn from. I could learn from right now. And they've come back into another situation, another opportunity to merge with another church, and he's going to help develop and become their digital pastor, their associate pastor, and also emphasize digital ministry. And their church gets to also have physical spaces in the same space they were already meeting in. So a lot of good things. It's a great story, and I hope that you appreciate this content, appreciate his vulnerability in sharing it with us. So let's enjoy.
So Cody Wallace, I'm the pastor of Journey Church. We are in Carlsbad, California. So we are situated not quite halfway, but map-wise, it looks halfway between LA and San Diego. So we're basically LA to San Diego is all beach towns along the coast, and we're in the larger of those beach towns.
Right. And you planted the church how long ago?
Let's see. We're about to hit our 3-year anniversary.
Awesome.
So yeah.
And you guys were leasing a theater and renovating, is that right?
Yeah. So when so I came from a church plant. I was the associate pastor at a church called Parkside Church in Oceanside, California. And that church helped launch us as a church plant, as their first church plant out. And so I was with Parkside and helped start that church. We were with them for about 3.5 years or so. And then we launched from there. And then we were in a school the whole time at Parkside and just felt called to maybe try to find a location that was a little bit different than kind of the typical school or theater setup. And so we just were praying over facilities. Our area is pretty expensive for commercial property. So right. We knew buying was definitely out of the picture, and even leasing. Yeah, I mean, it was, leasing a property was nuts still. So we didn't know what was going to happen there. I have a good friend named Sean who owns local businesses in the area, and so he owns like action sports stuff, paintball parks, laser tag arenas, things like that. He was looking for a new spot for a laser tag arena, and in that process of looking for a new spot for a laser tag arena, he asked me to come with him. We did some work together on some things, and so we went to this random abandoned theater that was built in 1960, I think, and we ran into there, and he wanted to turn it into like a family entertainment space, and we were looking through, and I just said, "Hey, what do you think if I use part of this and turn it into a church?" He said no. And I said, "Okay, sounds good." And so I was like, "Well, how can I help you then?" And so we were looking at it as a family entertainment space. And anyway, he came back a little bit later and said, "Well, I'll take half of it, you take half of it, and let's work out something."
Oh wow!
And so that kind of began our process of, so now we have a theater that is old and is needs a ton of work, but it's cheap because it is old and needs a ton of work. So it's cheap. It's 21,000 square feet, and you can't get that in our area without paying somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 a month. So it was, and we got it for much, much less than that. So that's what kind of started for us is we were able to get into a theater, just started renovating and working on it, and we were getting ready to launch our first services. Easter of 2018 was our first service, but as we were getting the space ready, we had the wildfires that came through. I don't know if you remember that in late 2017.
Yep.
So we had wildfires that roll through, and so I have a lot of church plant friends in the area, and none of them can meet because you couldn't meet in the school at the time. All the schools were evacuated and everything, and so they were just looking for spaces to meet for a couple of weeks. And so the very first thing we did in the theater was we did something called the evacuation services, where we brought all of our local church plant friends together into one space. And fortunately, we'd been working on the theater a little bit before that, or it wouldn't have been ready. But we had just got it to where we could technically have services in there. And so we brought 4 local church plants together and ran evacuation services for a couple weeks.
Wow.
So we ran two services, so 2 back-to-back services, and then we had four pastors. So I think the most fun part about bringing 4 pastors together is deciding who's going to speak. So that's fun. And so we just kind of divided up the best we could and worked it all out. But it was great. We got to pray together. We got to we kind of shared some speaking things and brought our churches together. It was awesome.
Awesome. So then COVID hits. You have a new challenge. You can't meet all this kind of stuff, and you guys start rethinking everything. So how's that been going?
Yeah. Okay, so we were at this point in the theater, like I said, almost 3 years, and we are trying to figure out what to do next. We have now part of our story too is that I own 2 businesses with the church plants, and where that matters for the church plants is that the businesses were feeding funds into the church plant. So my wife and I ran the businesses, but didn't take any salary or anything from it, so that the businesses could pay for the lease on the theater, so it paid some electricity bills, things like that. So that's part of the whole package, and that matters because when COVID hit, the first thing to go is the businesses, right? So we had a kids play gym that we owned, and then all of a sudden there's no revenue for 6, 7, 8 months with no revenue stream in sight, and so there's just no with the same bills that are due. So nothing changed as far as the money that we owed. It's just that we had no way of making revenue. So anyway, we basically went through all of our funds to kind of keep everything going. And when it ran out, it ran out. So we then had to make the choice to close Kidsville Play Gym as our business. So we had to close that down, which also Kidsville Play Gym was also our kids area for Sunday mornings for Journey Church.
Oh wow!
So it was both open every day in our kids ministry facility, and so now our kids ministry facility is now permanently closed because we can't afford it anymore. And then so that happened first. Then we get into the theater, and the theater started to get the same situation as we can't really meet inside of it. We were doing outside drive-in services for a little bit, but that's kind of a cool novelty at the beginning, and that wears off kind of quick, especially with family with kids. Yeah.
Gotcha.
With kids, it's difficult. I mean, even we are obviously very devoted to our church, and my wife is like, I don't like this. So so that's a good indication of okay, maybe we should do something else. So at that point, we went fully online, like a lot of churches are doing, and just kind of exploring the best way to do that and the best way to continue to reach people. Then we got to a point where we just couldn't. Something happened from Kidsville to the theater. We couldn't afford it anymore. We just can't. We couldn't keep going and paying the bills when we just couldn't afford it. So we got to the point we said, okay, what if we kind of reimagine the way that we are doing things, the way that we're doing church? What if we go to a strong online context, not just during COVID, but whatever post-COVID looks like, actually post-COVID as well. And so that's when I just began looking around at, is there a facility that we could use that would allow us to do online well, where that's kind of our big focus.
Right.
In the process, I found a facility called the Film Hub. And the Film Hub is a facility that YouTubers work out of there. They make commercials out of there. They do small TV shows out of there. So it's basically studio sets and podcasting rooms, green screen rooms, things like that. And so anyway, we made the choice to go into there. and then I hit, and this is Micah, where we haven't fully caught up on this
Right,
yet.
because that's kind of the last thing we were talking about. And then I was like, hey, I'm going to fly down and see what you guys are doing. And then I had a hiccup I got COVID, and so I couldn't fly down. So then I'm like, hey, let's catch up. So, yeah, tell me what's been going on. Tell me. I'm anxious to hear what has happened since then.
So this will be a great leadership lesson that I had to learn the really hard way. So maybe if for you or anyone who is potentially listening here, I wish I didn't have to learn it this way, but this was tough. So here's what we did. It is a massive pivot to go from a in-person service, in a good sized theater that everyone's kind of used to that setup. So for 3 years, we're a church plant, but we're not a church plant in the sense of no one's setting up, no one's tearing down, no one is,
right.
We're not doing all that stuff. We're there. We're in that facility. Our band walks in, and within 10 minutes, they're ready to play.
Yes.
Which was not our situation at Parkside, the church we came from. We were, spending 3 hours to set up and then another couple hours to tear it back down.
Mm-hmm.
So we're making a pretty big pivot. And so we take a day and do a full day leadership retreat at Film Hub. And so we do a full day leadership retreat there. We walk our leadership team through everything, kind of walk through the ins and outs of what this could look like. We talk about where the church is going, kind of Big C church in general, and the trends of the online ministry and where that's going. And at the end of that one day retreat, after I've walked everyone through the plan, the transition, where the church is going, where our church specifically is going, we walk through all that in a day, and we get to the end of it, and our leadership team pretty on board. In fact, this was a meeting I was worried about. I was like, I don't know if they're going to be on board with this, and I don't know, if they're on board, this is going to stop everything.
Right.
Leadership team's pretty on board, and so I was like, okay, this is good. Now, part of that is I just spent the whole day with them.
Sure.
Explaining every single thing that I have in my head is out on the table at this point. So I spent the whole day with them. I'm explaining everything. They're on board, and then we go through that process. As we go through the process, though, then the leadership team over the next, say, 2, 3, 4 weeks, kind of coming back to me and saying, hey, this person's really worried, talking about some of the families in our church. Or this person is really doesn't like this idea. Then I make the decision, okay, I'm gonna do a Zoom call with every single family in our church. Which, in hindsight,
like collectively or individually?
No, individually. So scheduled somewhere between like 35 and 50 Zoom calls. And just a lot. So I basically, my schedule got cleared, and basically what happened was it was just Zoom calls every single day with families. That was all I was doing every single day.
Wow.
And realize now it's such a big pivot that should have happened on the front end. I made the assumption. Here's my leadership mistake. I believe I made the assumption that the buy-in from my leadership team translated into the buy-in from our families, and that turned out not to be true. And then what happened, it was kind of the reverse, is once we got strong pushback from our families, that translated into pushback from our leadership team.
Sure.
So that it kind of came back at me. And so, So anyway, I made the decision there to say, okay, let's have a Zoom call with every single family, explain what we're thinking about doing, and then just say, let's hear your honest feedback and just get feedback from everybody. So kind of like a survey, but with full feedback.
Right.
So anyway, went through that process, and kind of the determination was about 80% of our families did not like this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, the direction was we were going mostly online. So our strategy was kind of threefold in this new model. The first part was online service every week, even post-pandemic, but done in as quality way as we could do it. So in a filming space, hopefully good cameras and just kind of doing a really good online service, but doing a service around the camera. So services were going to be 30, 35 minutes total. They were going to be, a lot shorter. I'm going to be speaking to the camera directly. We're going to be engaging with our online audience, all those kind of things.
And was it going to be live or pre-recorded?
Pre-recorded.
So simulated live, basically.
And by the way, we started doing this. So like we got about 4 services into that kind of pre-recorded mode, and so we were actually already on the path to doing that. We had moved into Film Hub, by the way, at this point too. So moved out of the theater, moved into Film Hub. The second part of it was I knew we still needed some in-person aspect, so we were going to do something called First Sundays, which was going to be the first Sunday of every month. We were going to meet together as a group. So watch parties every week. So the idea is that you're going to be not by yourself watching. You're going to be in a house having a meal with a family at the church, anywhere between 6 and 10 people in a watch party every week, and then one big group together every first Sunday of the month. And so we're going to bring everyone together for that. The Film Hub had like a cafe space that would hold about 100 people. And so that was kind of our idea there, that maybe we do one service there. If we got larger, a couple services out of that cafe space once a month. And the third part was what we were just calling community meetups. We just really wanted to develop community as best we can, community better than the services we were having on Sunday. So these were mom park dates, hikes, basketball games that would just be on the website every week you could jump in and be a part of for community. So that was kind of our threefold kind of idea: first Sundays, community meetups, and then online watch parties. And we went through the survey. We talked to all of our families, and about 80% were like, we do not like this idea. We really want a service on Sunday. One of the big concerns was kids. Are the majority of our families are young families that have kids, and so they're like, they're worried about our kids aren't going to get the same quality of a service that they would have gotten before, and we were worried about their development in that. And understood that was a piece that we thought we kind of had figured out, but we were definitely still working on. So that was a big piece that was in progress, and that was a big concern. And I think the other concern was just the people were used to going to church on Sunday morning, and I mean, all of a sudden you say, okay, we're going to do this in houses, and people were like, well, we don't want to be a part of a house church. And so I'm like, well, this isn't a house church. This is different, but it is in houses, and it is, getting people together, and it is a different format. So we got a lot of pushback. So what do we do at that point, right? Like I'm losing buy-in. My families are not in on this idea. And so we start kind of praying and figuring it out. In the process of doing all this, I determined, okay, I want the theater, because it's a great space. I want the theater to be used by a church. I don't want just some business to come in there and take that over. I want some church in our community to be able to use this. So I have a good friend in the area. His name is Josh, and he runs a church called the Station Church. And they've been a church plant for 9 years now. And for the last 3 years of that 9 years, they've been doing a campaign to raise money to eventually get into a permanent facility. So they're like ready to go whenever they can find something. And so I just gave him a call and said, hey, we're moving out of the theater. Think this might be a good fit for you guys to move into it. And I know you guys are raising money and that kind of thing. And, I think you guys could do some good things there, things that we weren't able to do. I mean, like I said, we were at this point 2.5 years in.
Right.
We're really young, and even when we launched from another church plant. So we were bootstrapped from the beginning. We weren't launched out of a larger congregation or church. We were really bootstrapped financially. And so all the work we did on the theater was like we raise, $5,000-$10,000 here, do a small project, do it all over again. We didn't have any kind of large budget for it. So anyway, they're ready to go. They move in. They're pumped. They're excited, and their church is very similar to ours. Their demographics are similar. Josh and I are friends, and anyway, so he moves in to the church. They get going immediately, renovating everything. This coincides with us just really hitting a wall where we're struggling. I'm trying to, you know this well, Micah, but leadership is very lonely at the top, especially when things aren't going well. And I kind of hit that wall where I thought I really had it figured out. I mean, we had a plan laid out, ready to go, and but taking all my families through this plan that they didn't want to be a part of, which wouldn't be a good move. It wouldn't be smart. And so it was just I got to a point where I was like, man, I'm not sure exactly what to do here. We were in this weird middle ground catch-22 space where we We have moved out of the theater. We
Right.
go with this digital strategy.
Right.
Digital strategy people don't like, and so we're caught somewhere between the theater and Film Hub with no home and no real strategy at this point.
Wow.
Which is scary. It's a scary place to be in, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably good you didn't visit me during that time, because that wouldn't have been very helpful for either one of us.
It was God ordained COVID. I just
Yeah.
needed to be in bed. Yeah. So that's where you're at currently, right now,
No,
or you have another
we
development.
We have a development. So
Okay.
we've come out of that. So
Very good. I'm
yeah,
glad
we
you're
were
not
still in
there.
that. What's that?
I'm glad you're not stuck right there and just trying to figure it out. That's the worst.
No. We were stuck for a couple weeks,
Yep.
and that just kind of led us to like, okay, we're gonna pray about this. I'm gonna have like conversations with some wise people, kind of in my local circle here, and
Yes.
just kind of figure out, okay, and we're part of a denomination too, so we reached out there and just said, hey, do you have any advice for us, and what are your thoughts? So we just reached out and just kind of took some advice, talked to some different people, prayed, and tried to kind of figure out what the next move was. In that process, and this is kind of the beginning of the unstuck portion. So, and this is important to understand for me, is I have a conviction, and Micah, I think you already know this, but I have a conviction that the future of the church, there is a lot of digital practice that needs to go into that. That there will be people that will see your church, that will probably even attend your church digitally, maybe for months, maybe forever, that will maybe never walk through the doors of your church. They just want to be digital, and so I'm convicted that we have to go beyond live streaming a live service from our facilities to actually doing ministry online for people, doing discipleship online, doing evangelism online, doing all these things online for people, where they can still get those experiences while still maybe not choosing to come into the church. We would love if they come into the building. We would love if they come to the church, but just a realization that might not happen. And that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal before was live stream a service well enough that people get the concept and they come into the building. And I think that is still a goal, but I don't think that's the goal anymore. And so it was out of that conviction that we said, okay, we got to do something a little bit different. So with that idea, that's just kind of rattling around in my brain. Like we still need to do this, but we're kind of in this middle stuck point. And I think looking back, my big mistake was I essentially over-indexed. I thought, okay, we're in this basically fully in-person service pre-COVID, right, that we're doing just a little bit of live streaming on. And so I over-indexed the other way and said, okay, now we're going to do like basically a 90% digital service with some in-person parts. And so I went from kind of one almost extreme to the other without kind of pulling somewhere in the middle. So we're in this process. I'm thinking through this and trying to really figure it out. And then Josh is the pastor that moved into the theater of the Station Church. We start talking, and he said, hey, I hear your heart on this. We're not very good at this. What do you think if we put all the money into the theater? We'll renovate it in 3 months. So make it almost a brand new space. We combine our groups together. You become our digital pastor and also have some other, main speaking roles and that kind of thing. I'll be the lead pastor, and then we combine this thing together where we can kind of do both well, which included for us actually eventually building a studio in the theater and building spaces specifically for digital that we would be able to use, and but then also giving back the component to our people of having a Sunday morning service,
right? And sort of children's and family ministry components as well that
right.
Put at ease all of those worries for the and you get to use the space that you've been dreaming about.
Yeah, and that was another piece of it that I didn't realize as we started talking to some of our families. I just didn't realize I cast the vision really hard on that theater space for almost 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
And people saw a final version of the theater in their heads that now we were never going to get to.
Right.
and there was a lot of time investment into that. There's a lot of thought and prayer and just a lot of work that went into even getting the theater from unusable to usable as a church space, but it definitely was not in its final version. And there's a lot of vision cast around that, and I kind of pulled the rug out from under that vision very quickly. And that was, in hindsight, that was a mistake. And so I allowed us, and that's a big part of it, because this kind of merger would not be as clean and would probably be more difficult if we weren't going back into the same space. Yeah. So the vision that was cast 3 years ago is still alive, just in a slightly different context.
Right.
But then I still get to do the things that I'm convicted about. And the things that we think. So basically, we land somewhere where we kind of get to keep the things that people really loved about the vision of our church, the things we're doing, but we get to also add in these new components that are big convictions of mine as well. Yes. So we kind of get to meet in the middle versus over-indexing one way or the other.
Yeah. So you guys have made you went from an in-person, pretty much exclusively church, pretty much, right? You were probably recording and then posting later stuff, yep. As many of us had been doing for years, hoping that if someone missed the service, they would go back and watch it, which they never did. So it was, they never did unless they were a part of a large church with a ton of production that, unless you were Life Church or North Point or one of these guys who you can't even compare what you're posting, what I was posting. And so they never watched it. And if they were missing, then they have the option to go watch their favorite pastor,
right,
favorite celebrity pastor or whatever. And you guys have like The Rock down there, and you guys got some big guys down there that people like to watch outside of normal church with you. Like, you're their church, but they also like to supplement from here and there and there. And there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good. We do that too, as the leaders. So there's a lot of good that can happen, a lot of growth that can happen from that as well. No problem with that. But they're not going back and watching the service they missed from their home church. Yep. So then you went completely online, and now through pain and discovery, you're in maybe what could be the sweet spot. That the struggle, individual struggle as a leader, may not be as hard. May not be. We don't know. We're not there. But you get to pursue the things that God has placed on your heart as core convictions of what needs to happen in the church, while also the people of the church are served in a way that they really want and need right now, and you get to share that leadership load. I think that's a beautiful thing. So you've went physical to digital, and now you're what they call phygital, which is like that dual-pronged approach, which we've talked about as a church as well. How do we get to a dual-pronged approach? And right now we're all digital, right? Mm-hmm. But we know at some point people are going to want some physical. And now we're at the place where, like, the facility we were using went into contract with a new church plant. I think they were just waiting for the opportunity to swoop in there. And, it's like, but they can't meet there anyways because it's closed. So they're just, we ended our contract because I'm like, I'm not going to pay. I'm just going to keep paying. and a facility is a facility. And so I'm not sure what the future looks like for us at Two Cities Church, but what you've got going, I think we're going to hear more and more of these stories. I think this time and this disruption is what is going to push a lot of those mergers and going to push a lot of those, hey, we need to be good at both, and it's going to kind of help people define where they want to be and which lane they want to be, and but still have a symbiotic relationship that makes sense. So man, I'm excited to see what happens. Now I looked at your guys' Facebook page and a couple things before, and so I saw something with the station, and then I looked at their website, and their website said that they had temporarily combined services with Grace Church or something.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's a lot of moves happening down there in your area. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, let me. That is confusing for sure. Let me kind of explain what that is. So we the station church is going back into like limited in-person services right now.
Yep.
But with no facility, right? The theater is not. It's
not ready.
It's renovated. It needs you can't have services in there right now. Everything's drywall's down, floors are torn up, all that kind of stuff, right? So, we have another local church that's an established church, been around for a while, or large church called Grace Church that is like a few miles down the road from our theater, and the pastor is friends there with Pastor Josh, the pastor of the station church, and so they just said, "Hey, we would like to offer you a facility on Friday nights. If you want to, meet in kind of limited capacity on Friday nights, we'll offer the facility to you for that." And so that's what that partnership is by it. And so in exchange, Grace has services on Sunday morning, and so Josh occasionally speaks there and kind of helps out there. But that will be that's kind of just a temporary facility partnership until we get into the theater. So on Friday, so we're doing Friday night stuff there now. It just started, and we are that's just the station and Journey Church on Friday nights, but in Grace's facility. So it's
it's a weird thing, right?
But yeah,
it's all Kingdom Resources. Now, okay, so tell me how. I got two questions. Number one, I'll let you respond to that, and then I'll ask you the second one. One, how are your families feeling about all this now?
Much better. So we did a second round of Zoom calls, and just kind of talked to different families and just got feedback on, hey, what. So, and this was before we. The lesson I learned was don't sign off on this decision until we do these kind of family calls first. So wasn't going to go full in until we had the calls and make sure that everyone was on board. And any major change, you're going to lose a few families in the process, but the majority are on board. So, so the feeling was much better about this direction than it was about the direction that we were going. And they still love the digital aspect. I think it's one thing to remember, though, that, and this is something I forgot in the process, the digital aspect as we're thinking about that is really geared toward the people who don't know about our church yet. Not necessarily the families that are currently part of our church. Like they're families that are part of our church. If we do a digital offering, if we offer in person or an outside service, like they're gonna make that work. They're gonna make that happen, in some capacity. But when I'm thinking digital, I'm actually thinking about more of like, our families, but also reaching new families in our community who are not, yet part of our church at all. But we can't do that while also forgetting about what's good for our families who have been with us all along. And that was where we kind of had a misstep there.
You were hoping that in planting a new digital church, the physical church would come along and support that new vision, basically, because it was going to be a new thing, like a completely new thing. It was not going to be part of all the vision that had been cast for the past years, right? It was going to be like, hey, we're in a new season. Maybe that vision was great for a different time, but we need to adjust. And so you were hoping that everybody would come along. And that was a bold move, and I really appreciate you sharing with me your leadership wisdom there and what you learned. And maybe it had to happen that way. Maybe it needed to happen that way so that you could be positioned to make the move to merge and that sort of thing. It would be a lot harder to make that move if you hadn't moved out and already had your mind set on something else. So, second question. So what have you formulated And what is going to be the sort of digital strategy for? Is it going to be called the Station Church? How are you going to merge the names, or what's going to happen there?
There's a great book called Better Together by Warren Bird that really like walks you through all the questions you should ask in any kind of merger situation. So if you're considering, ever merging or thinking through that, that's a great book to go through. At this point, I felt super behind, and I had never had any experience with mergers, and I believe in reading wisdom very much. So I got that book, read it in 24 hours, and literally wrote down every question I could think of problems that we could have, issues. And through that book, it kind of walked through 4 different types of mergers. So when we say merger, the merger term is really the umbrella over like what could be very different mergers. So an example of that would be a very traditional church that has maybe the resources in a building, but a younger church plant that comes in that has the momentum, some younger families, some people that merge. That's not our merge, but that would be an example of one that could have some snags, right? Have some hangups. It could be great, but it's, you're going to merge 2 different cultures together. That's going to be very difficult. Our merge is more of a acquisitional merge. And so Station is merging. It is basically taking everything that would be Journey Church at this point. And we feel the most comfortable about that because we don't have a lot of those cultural hurdles in place. Our families are very similar, and part of this process too is we're having these Friday services to kind of ensure that we have a good walk into this. We're not just like launching into it immediately. So we're going to have 3 months or so of these Friday services where our groups are combined, our worship teams are combined. I'm going to share some of the speaking duties, all that kind of thing. So but it would be an acquisition. We would become the Station Church. I would become the digital associate pastor. We're kind of working on how that title fits, but basically the number 2 under Josh and working a lot on our digital stuff.
Yes.
And then using the eventual space to build out digital specific spaces that we can be able to use. But we would, in this scenario, we would be giving, we would be handing our bank account over. We would be together, combining some of our board members. Staffing is something that we are in process of figuring out. How do we combine our staff? Does all the staff stay? Do we, we have to work out payroll and what that looks like? We're just combining everything. So we are an acquisitional merger where we go into the Station Church with our assets.
So legally right now, you're 2 entities, and you're going to be working towards one legal entity that takes over everything, and there's sort of a acquisition surrender that's happening.
That's right. So at some point, the Journey Church 501c3 will be shut down, and everything will be acquired by the Station Church. So that's the plan. That's separate right now, but that'll happen eventually.
Did Journey have a PPP loan?
Yes.
So do you have to kind of wait for all that to get buttoned up before you shut down everything, like forgiveness?
I don't think
and
so.
All that?
I know of other business. Well, I'll give ours an example. We have shut down our Kidsville business, but we had a PPP loan for them that we can still work on getting everything taken care of through that, even though the business is legally shut down. So I don't think that's holding us up. I think, and we're not really held up. It's more of a we're just taking the time to kind of work through it as 2. Like, there's no reason for us to have to be one entity right now.
Yes.
And so we're just kind of taking the time as 2. But for sure, by the plan is to launch together in Easter, just depending on how COVID's going and everything. That we plan for the theater. We're working every day. People are in the theater working on it. So the plan is for the theater hopefully to be ready by Easter and to launch into that then. And then for sure, multiple weeks before then we would combine. So it'll happen in the next month or so, most likely.
Wow. Well, congratulations. You figured out a path, man. That's half the battle right now. It's figuring out a path forward and learning, because you've been laboring for this vision. You've been laboring for this church, for this community. You love this church, this community, and God started messing with you a little bit personally in what you felt needs to happen for the church, and blessed you with an opportunity to pursue that. Man, that's awesome. So I think this will be, is there anything in this interview that I cannot share that you would not be comfortable with me sharing with anybody?
I don't think so. I think most of the stuff that is now pretty public knowledge. Yeah. I think the key to know is that like we're not merged yet. So I think that's important to know.
It's in process.
It's in process. Yeah, it's not. Now we've announced it from our Friday service stage that this is going to happen, that we're praying through it, but this is the direction that we are headed. Yeah. So we've announced that publicly. It's just important to know that it's not official yet. We're not officially merged, and we're in process. So
cool. Well, I actually think this would be really helpful for a lot of people who don't who are not there yet, but are on their way to having to make some of these hard calls you guys have made, and making some of the mistakes that you feel that you've learned from. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to fill me in, talk to me. I'd love to come down still at some point and see.
Yeah.
Especially as you guys have redone this facility and kind of envision what this next stage looks like for how you're going to approach the digital side of the job. I'd love to learn what you guys are learning, because I'm of the same conviction of you. There's a whole mess of people out there who are never going to walk into a facility, and they're going to be finding faith community online and engaging with that like we would have hung out, right? When we were teenagers, we would have called each other up, hey, I'm on my way over, or whatever. People are doing that, but they're hanging out over like a Call of Duty session, especially men.
Yep.
It's so crazy. Men, especially men who are blue collar workers, they're not on a computer all day. They're not at a desk all day. They're on the UPS truck or whatever. They come home. They work in a warehouse, some other place. They come home and they log in for a couple hours and decompress with the boys. That could easily be a small group for them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like there's a lot of opportunity, because there's a lot of necessity almost to reach people where they're at, where they're hanging out, where's the virtual water cooler. So it's getting harder and harder to get men to a service unless they're pulled by their family and their sense of like, I guess we need this, or my wife needs this, or my kids need this. And so how do we engage these guys?
It's super clear to me now, working through it, that the way we're traditionally doing church plus a digital experience is 100% both and, not either or. And really got to flesh that out more and more, but and kind of what that looks like for us. And I think that the Big C Church will be doing that over the next couple of years, really fleshing out what that looks like. But absolutely, a church without a strong digital strategy, without a strong community strategy, is going to be in trouble, I think, in the future. If we're just relying on people coming on Sunday morning, I think we're going to find that's a bad strategy.
If our goal is simply to get viewers and digital people into a physical space, I think we lose a lot of opportunity. I think we have a better opportunity to get digital viewers to a service opportunity in the community than we do to a service in a building. Like, hey, we're going to go feed the homeless. Would you guys like to join me? I know you usually watch online, but it's a great way to serve people. I think that's way more attractive to these people than would you like to come to Christmas Eve? You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's just my opinion.
I agree.
Certainly there's got to be exceptions to that rule, but I think the majority of people, that's going to be the thing. I mean, I've got people I'm trying to reach out to that I've been trying to reach out to for years. Like, hey, come to a service. You know, I see them a couple times a month or whatever, and they're always like, yeah, you're always trying to get me to a service. But since COVID started, I'm like, it's never been easier. You don't have to come to a service. Like, just log in even for a minute and just see what we're about. I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well, man. Well, again, man, I don't want to keep you forever, but thanks so much for catching me up, and let's stay in contact. I know my plane ticket's good for like a year. So
Sweet. All right.
So I'll come down after you guys figure out what you're doing, I guess, and then and see where the dust settles and see the place. And so maybe sometime after Easter would be good.
That's awesome. I would love that.
All right, Cody. Well, let's stay in contact. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing for the kingdom.
Yeah, thanks, Micah. Thanks, Roy. Talk to you soon, man.
Yep.
Well, I hope you found as much value in that conversation as I did. I learned a lot actually in that, and it's helping me think through some things as well. So I hope that you'll consider subscribing, give us a like, a share, pass this along to a pastor specifically who may be struggling in figuring out the road ahead right now, especially on the West Coast, as many of our counties are still under shutdown orders or health restrictions. And so this may help somebody. And that's my hope and prayer, is that it helps somebody. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one.